You can buy wool from a retailer, you can buy it directly from a wool mill, and the dyeing process I use is in a giant pot on the stove with almost boiling water and white vinegar, which is my mordant, and acid dyes. I use magic carpet dyes because that's what I learned with. You can dye a whole skein at a time. If you have a big enough pot, you can put several skeins in so that they're all like the same dye lot. You can dye smaller amounts of yarn and do them like paint swatch goes, you know, from the very lightest, like 6 to 8 values of the same color. And you would use those mostly if you were doing flowers and you needed several values of the same color in a flower.
Okay.
Once a week, once at the town hall, twice here at home, we have a snack, and Friday girls, we have lunch.
Nice.
But on the other days of the week, I design, I draw patterns, I finish pieces, which is this part for people who don't like to do that, and I dye a yarn. And I'll start out with this and maybe end up with any of these. And the yarn mill that I purchase pre-dyed yarn from has like 60 odd colors. So if you want something variegated, it's got to be hand dyed. And that'll give you a background like this.
Oh, nice.
See, where it's not just one flat color. And this was hand dyed as well. And this is hooked in what we call high and low. Because obviously some loops are high and some are low. And then the face is hooked a little bit lower, and that made it the 3-dimensional.
Nice.
So we hook on linen as a background. Traditionally, it would have been done like on a coffee bag with strips of wool that would have been cut from blankets or old pants or jackets or whatever. And they were for wiping your feet at the back door. And most things now are a little more art and not quite wipe your feet at the back door. Some people still do. I hook with a single strand of yarn. I figured it out last night. There's approximately 122 loops per square inch, and it takes me roughly 5 minutes. And that's if I'm just hooking background. If you're doing something like this where you're changing colors or, you know, changing shapes, it takes longer. So when somebody says to me, how long does it take you to do that? That's kind of the bare minimum, is just a plain background. So it takes quite a while to make even a 12-inch circle. And when you get into mat size, it's considerable length of time.
Okay.
So we're the cheapest hookers on earth.
Cheapest hookers on earth.
Yes.
And underpaid.
And very underpaid, in my opinion. I drew this pattern on this linen. This little fox was on a napkin. It had a lot more flowers, but I eliminated those because I don't like too much foo-foo. So I drew that on there with black permanent marker, because the last thing we do is press this with a wet towel. And if you use like a Crayola marker, that dye will come through. And you don't want that to happen, especially if you're doing a white background like this. So your string of yarn is, I'm a righty, so it's in my left hand. I use my right hand, and I pulled the tail to the top, which if you're a cross stitcher sounds absolutely wrong, but we trim it off at the end. And go down through the holes in your linen and grasp your yarn and pull it up through into a loop. When I teach beginners, I teach them to pull their loops high and then pull it back down with their left hand. That way you make sure you've got your yarn all the way through. And right now I'm just filling in background, trying not to make it all straight lines, just because it makes it a little bit more interesting. Okay, stop. So traditionally, rugs were made from worn out other things, like maybe pants or blankets, that most of it was worn out, but there were still good parts, so they would cut those into strips and pull those loops of strips through the holes and make a loop and make a mat out of that for the back door or for wherever, but they were for cleaning your feet off essentially. But they would have used a much larger hook because they were using quite a wide strip, maybe 1/4 of an inch wide of material. So this is a smaller hook. And what you'll do, I'll start you here, is put your hook down in the hole, pull your tail to the top, and then just make loops in the next bunch of holes. And if you pull this one a little higher and pull it back down with this hand, that'll help with your adjustment. And if you pull towards what you've already hooked, it'll save you doing this, which just pulls it all out.
Okay.
So there's your 5-second lesson. I'll anchor it in for you. There. And pull it back down. So now you know why it takes 5 minutes to hook a square in.
But very therapeutic, I would
It
think.
is. It's almost
Calming.
like meditation. Pulling those.
Now, where am I going from there?
You can just follow along here.
Okay.
You can go wherever there's an empty space.
Okay.
And Lynn, repeat to Lisa what you said about the cheesies.
Oh, one good thing about hooking
Yeah.
is it keeps your hands busy and you can't eat cheesies.
Oh, that's a good thing.
You can watch football. And it might get you through having to watch football, but you can't eat cheesies by a hook. So it has many purposes.
Very cool.